So if you had been made redundant, for example, from a company, you still want to position this in a very positive way, because the reality is that people don't necessarily want to employ someone who's unemployed, has been fired, or has been made redundant from a company. I hate to say this, but you don't usually make your top talent redundant. So you have to be very careful with how you manage this message to market. So in that example, I would probably say something like, I had a very good experience at company ABC. I was promoted several times during my tenure. I learnt a lot and I got a great opportunity to work closely with the CEO. Unfortunately, the company has done a major corporate restructure. And although I was offered some alternative opportunities within the company, I had made a decision that I had spent quite a long time at the company. I'd been there nearly 4 or 5 years, and the timing was right for me to take that opportunity to bring that work experience to a close, and now I'm looking for my next best opportunity. So you see what I did there. I kept it very positive. I spoke about the positive nature of the company, even though the company's restructured. That's the nature of the world. But I haven't overemphasized that I was made redundant. I haven't overemphasized that I was let go. I've put a positive spin on it. And this is the key, guys, because you really got to put a positive forward position on these roles and these questions that you're going to be asked. So they're going to ask some basic questions like why are you here? Why have you left your previous employer? So you need to get that right. They're going to also ask you why you want to work for that particular company. And this is really important for you to demonstrate that you've done your research, that you've really gone above and beyond to prepare for this interview, and you genuinely want to join the company. You can always spot when someone is just applying for a job and they're just going through the motions. So it's really important when they ask you, why do you want to work for our firm, that you tell them something a little bit more than what you've just read on the company website. For example, you might say, look, I have always wanted to work for Dell Computers. I have read extensively about the company. I have watched all the annual reports and videos. I've read all your recent press releases. I'm actually a Dell subscriber, product consumer. I have several Dell products in my home. It's always been a very good experience working with Dell products. And I've always aspired to work for the company, and these are the reasons why. So it has to come across very genuine and above and beyond, as I said, what could have just been ascertained from reading a website. If that genuineness does not come across, they will sense that, and they will ultimately defer to a candidate that genuinely wants to work for the company. I would always hire someone who genuinely wants to work for the company versus someone who had necessarily all the right skills and the ticks in the box. That cultural fit piece is usually much more valuable than the actual skills and the credentials. I'm not saying they're not important, but you will gravitate towards candidates that genuinely want to join the business. They'll also ask you about salary expectations, and I spoke earlier about salary expectations when the headhunters are asking you about your salary. But in these conversations with employers, you really want to try and defer salary discussion as long as possible. To blurt out a salary really early on in a recruitment process can be very negative, and it can, in fact, prevent you going forward in a recruitment process. So you have to get very skilled at salary negotiation, and the first rule is always to try and defer this conversation as long as possible. So you could say something like, look, the headhunter has given me some guidance on the salary expectations for the role. I'm very comfortable with that. I would prefer to talk about salary a little bit further down in the process when I'm confirmed as the preferred candidate. We're certainly all in the ballpark with the salary expectations, but you just don't want to get into sort of putting facts and figures on the table at this point, because you're not even confirmed as the likely candidate, and it could be used to screen you out. If, for example, your salary expectations are quite high, that may mean that as a result of that, they gravitate towards a cheaper candidate. And keep in mind, employers have a lot of choice in this employment market, so getting those higher salary packages negotiated is challenging. So you really want to try and defer that as long as possible so that they've actually fallen totally in love with you before you even start to talk about salary and how that may transpire. The other thing you need to be very mindful of is that throughout this whole process, everything is on display. Your manners, your correspondence, how you greet the receptionist, everything is on display. They're really trying to assess what you would be like to work with. And again, along the same lines as something else I've said, people do tend to gravitate towards executives who are likable, that you would like to work with, that come across really very, very well, can build rapport naturally. And so you need to try and incorporate that into your interview technique, that you can build some rapport, that you are coming across in a very positive way. Because without that, it can make it very, very challenging to go all the way through the recruitment process. Again, very important that you don't display frustration or annoyance. The company will have a process that they want to go through, and most employers these days have a philosophy of slow to hire, quick to fire. You might have heard that phrase. And so it's not unusual that you will go for 6 or 7 interviews, maybe even 8. But I look at it from the other perspective as well. You also get the opportunity to meet with 8 different people, sometimes from the company. You can make a very informed decision. And if we go back to our overarching methodology, 100 approaches in 100 days, that may mean literally hundreds of interviews are going to happen. And you're making a really good informed career decision when you go for a lot of conversations, going in eyes wide open. What do these people really like to work with? What would it be like to be in the job day to day? And you get an opportunity to ask questions as well. A lot of people get caught up in the recruitment process and just allow the company just to fire questions at them, whereas you have to try and pivot it to be a peer-to-peer conversation. And by that I mean you want to be able to ask some questions. Now, that's not to say you're going to bombard them with questions and disrupt their recruitment process, but you do want to look for opportunities to ask questions so that you're getting an informed view as to what the company would be like to work for, what are the people like, what would the job really entail. You need to get that clear in your mind so that when eventually an offer comes your way, you can put hand on heart and say, look, I'm really confident that this is going to be the right career move for me. So in summary, this interview process is complex. You cannot do it with a light-hearted kind of approach. You must prepare. You must prepare in advance your examples that you're going to be using that demonstrate the competencies. You have to stay in interview as long as possible so that you are given the best possible chance at being offered the position. And you really want to go very much on the front foot, very positive, coming across very well throughout the entire process so that people really do walk away with a great impression of you and the competencies, the experience that you can bring to the table.